The stagecoach rattled to a stop in a cloud of dust as Emma Rose clutched her swollen belly, her knuckles white with fear. Willow Creek's train station loomed before her, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the weathered platform where a crowd had gathered to meet the incoming passengers. It was 1875, and she was alone in a town where no one knew her name or the shame she carried. "End of the line, miss," the driver called, not bothering to offer assistance as the other passengers filed out. Emma stepped carefully onto the wooden platform, her legs unsteady after the long journey. Her cotton dress, once fine but now travel-worn, did little to hide her condition. 7 months pregnant and without a husband, she might as well have worn a scarlet letter pinned to her chest. The waiting crowd parted like water around a stone, creating distance as whispers rippled through the gathering. Women pulled their children closer, men turned their backs, and Emma felt the weight of their judgment heavy upon her shoulders. "Indecent," one woman muttered loudly enough for Emma to hear. "Shameless," another agreed with a disapproving sniff. Emma stood frozen, her carpetbag clutched in one hand, the other resting protectively over her unborn child. Her letter to the Harvey house had promised work as a waitress, but that was before her condition had become so obvious. Now, no representative came forward to claim her as promised. "I'm looking for Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet platform. From the Harvey House restaurant, a thin man in a well-pressed suit stepped forward, his mustache twitching as he assessed her. "That would be me, miss. I regret to inform you that the position has been filled." His eyes deliberately dropped to her midsection. "We cannot employ women in your condition. It would upset our respectable clientele." "But your letter said, 'Good day, miss.'" He tipped his hat and turned away, leaving Emma stranded. Panic rose in her throat. Her meager savings would afford perhaps 2 nights at the local hotel, and then what? She had fled St. Louis with nowhere else to go, no family to return to. The child's father, a married banker who had promised love and delivered only ruin, had made it clear what would happen if she ever tried to contact him again. The station began to empty as the crowd dispersed, some casting backward glances filled with curiosity or disdain. Emma felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. She had cried enough in the past months to fill the Mississippi. "Need some help with that bag, madam." The voice came from behind her, deep and clear. Emma turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing light brown hair with strands of gold where the sun had bleached it. A leather vest hung open over a cotton shirt, and the star pinned to his chest caught the afternoon light. "Deputy Blake Anderson," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Seems like you might be in need of some assistance." Emma hesitated, years of proper upbringing warring with desperate circumstances. "Emma Rose," she finally replied, placing her hand in his. "And yes, I appear to be in rather dire straits, deputy." His grip was firm but gentle, his expression revealing nothing of the judgment she had seen in the others. "I couldn't help but overhear, Harvey House giving you trouble. They've rescinded their offer of employment." Emma's voice remained steady despite the tremor in her heart. "It seems my condition makes me unsuitable." Deputy Anderson's gaze briefly touched her midsection before returning to her face. "Their loss, I expect. You come all this way for that job." "I did. I have nowhere to return to and limited funds." The admission cost her pride, but pride would not feed her or her child. He considered this, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "My sister runs a small boarding house on the edge of town, not fancy but clean and respectable. She might be able to help you get sorted." "I couldn't impose, not an imposition. Sarah's always saying I never bring her interesting company." His smile was unexpected, transforming his serious face into something almost boyish. "Besides, it's my duty to ensure the welfare of everyone who passes through Willow Creek." Before Emma could protest further, he had taken her carpetbag and offered his arm. Town's not far. Can you manage the walk? The kindness, simple and without expectation, nearly undid her. Yes, thank you. I've been sitting for so long, a walk would be welcome. As they left the station, Emma felt the stares of the remaining onlookers. Deputy Anderson either didn't notice or chose to ignore them, guiding her down the main street with an easy confidence that seemed to deflect the worst of the attention. How long have you been a deputy here? Emma asked, seeking distraction from her thoughts. Going on 5 years now, came west after the war looking for something quieter than what I'd seen. Did you find it? Quietness, I mean, he laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Not exactly. Willow Creek has its share of trouble, miners, cowboys, the usual frontier disputes. But it's home now. They passed a general store, a saloon already lively despite the early hour, and a small church whose bell rang out 4 o'clock. The town was larger than Emma had expected, with wooden sidewalks elevating pedestrians above the muddy street and several brick buildings suggesting prosperity. The silver mine up north keeps us growing, Blake explained, following her gaze. Town's doubled in size these past 3 years. It seems established. Emma chose the word carefully. She had feared a rough camp or lawless outpost. Willow Creek appeared to be neither. We're getting there. Still wild enough to keep me employed, civilized enough for ladies like my sister to live comfortably. He paused at a crossroad. Speaking of which, her place is just down this way. They turned onto a quieter street lined with cottonwood trees. At the end stood a 2-story white house with green shutters and a wide porch. Flowers bloomed in window boxes, and a small sign reading Anderson Boarding House hung beside the door. It's lovely, Emma said, genuinely surprised. Sarah takes pride in it. Our parents had a place similar back in Pennsylvania. Before they reached the gate, the front door opened and a woman appeared. Younger than Emma had expected, Sarah Anderson had the same blue eyes as her brother, though her hair was darker. She wore a practical dress with an apron, and her expression was curious but not unwelcoming. Blake, this is unexpected. Her gaze moved to Emma, taking in her condition with a quick assessment that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Sarah, this is Miss Emma Rose. She's had some trouble with employment arrangements. I thought perhaps you might have a room available. Sarah's eyes softened. Of course, please come in. You look exhausted from your journey. The interior of the boarding house was as welcoming as its exterior, clean, modestly furnished, with the scent of baking bread filling the air. A parlor to the right held bookshelves and comfortable chairs, while a dining room to the left was set for the evening meal. I have a room on the first floor that might suit, Sarah said, leading them through a hallway. Saves you climbing stairs in your condition. Emma felt gratitude surge through her. That's very kind, but I should be clear, my funds are limited. I had expected to begin work immediately. Sarah and Blake exchanged a glance that Emma couldn't interpret. Let's get you settled first, Sarah suggested. We can discuss arrangements after you've rested. The room was small but perfect, a single bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a window overlooking a kitchen garden. Emma felt the tension of the past weeks begin to ease from her shoulders. Thank you, she said, turning to face the siblings. Both of you, I don't know what I would have done otherwise. Willow Creek isn't always the most welcoming place, Sarah admitted, but not everyone shares the same narrow views. Blake set down the carpetbag and moved toward the door. I should get back to my rounds. Sheriff gets cranky if I'm gone too long. Will you join us for supper? Sarah asked. Around 6, he hesitated, glancing at Emma, if Miss Rose doesn't object to my company. After your kindness today, I would welcome it, Emma replied honestly. With a nod and a touch to the brim of his hat, Blake departed, leaving Emma alone with Sarah. Now, Sarah said, her practical nature asserting itself, why don't you rest while I finish preparing supper? We can talk more later. Left alone, Emma sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. She had arrived expecting rejection and found unexpected kindness instead. As her hand moved to rest on her swollen belly, she felt the baby stir. Perhaps, she whispered to her unborn child. "We've found a place to rest, at least for now." The boarding house gradually came alive with sounds of other residents returning for the evening meal. Emma washed her face and hands, smoothed her hair, and changed into her second dress, nearly as worn as the first but cleaner. When she emerged from her room, the aroma of beef stew and fresh bread drew her to the dining room. Sarah was placing a large tureen on the table as 5 other boarders, 2 older women who appeared to be schoolteachers, a young clerk from the general store, and an elderly couple took their seats. They regarded Emma with curious glances, but followed Sarah's lead in welcoming her politely. Blake arrived just as they were sitting down, his hair damp from washing and his star temporarily replaced by a clean shirt. He took a seat beside Emma, his large frame making the dining chair seem almost dainty. "Miss Rose is joining us from St. Louis," Sarah announced as she served the stew. "She'll be staying with us for a time." No mention was made of Emma's condition or lack of employment, for which she was deeply grateful. The conversation flowed easily around local matters: the upcoming Founders' Day celebration, news of a cattle drive expected the following week, and speculation about whether the new schoolhouse would be completed before winter. "Miss Emma, what brings you to our little corner of Colorado?" Mrs. Pemberton, one of the schoolteachers, eventually asked. Emma set down her spoon, conscious of all eyes turning toward her. "I was seeking a fresh start," she said simply, "the opportunity to build something new." "Well, Willow Creek is certainly growing," Mr. Jenkins, the elderly boarder, noted. "Always room for folks willing to work hard." "Do you have any particular skills, dear?" his wife inquired. Emma straightened slightly. "I was a bookkeeper's assistant in St. Louis for 3 years. I'm also proficient in typing with the new machines, correspondence, and basic accounting." Blake looked up with interest. "Is that so? The mining company office lost their clerk last month, left for Denver without notice." "They're still looking to fill the position," the young store clerk confirmed. "Mr. Harrison was complaining about it just today when he came in for supplies." Hope flickered in Emma's chest, but she tamped it down. "I doubt they would consider someone in my situation." "Harrison's a practical man," Blake said. "Cares more about competence than convention. Might be worth speaking with him." Sarah nodded encouragingly. "Blake could introduce you tomorrow." I would be grateful for the opportunity," Emma managed, overcome by this unexpected possibility. As the meal continued, Emma found herself drawn into the easy camaraderie of the table. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like an outcast. When the apple pie was served for dessert, she even found herself laughing at Mr. Jenkins' tale of how he had accidentally set the church's new organ on fire during last Christmas's service. After dinner, while the others retired to the parlor, Emma helped Sarah clear the dishes despite the younger woman's protests. "You've been very kind," Emma said quietly as they worked. "I want to be forthright about my situation." Sarah glanced toward the parlor door to ensure their privacy. "You don't owe me explanations." "Perhaps not, but I owe you honesty." Emma took a deep breath. "I was engaged to a banker in St. Louis, a man I believed loved me. When I discovered I was with child, he revealed he was already married with a family in Chicago, his business in St. Louis was only temporary." Sarah's face softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry, Emma," he offered money for procedures. "When I refused, he threatened to ruin my reputation if I ever revealed him as the father." Emma's hands trembled slightly as she dried a plate. "I couldn't stay. My parents passed years ago and I have no siblings. The Harvey House position seemed providential." "Until they saw your condition," Sarah finished. Emma nodded. "I have savings for perhaps 2 weeks after that." She let the sentence hang unfinished. "Well, you're welcome here for as long as you need," Sarah said firmly. "And if this position at the mining office doesn't materialize, we'll find something else. Willow Creek has more opportunities than first appear. Your brother seems to think highly of this Mr. Harrison." A smile touched Sarah's lips. "Blake is a good judge of character. It served him well as deputy. He was very kind today. Not everyone would have stepped forward. That's Blake, always championing the underdog. Sarah paused, studying Emma. He doesn't do it out of pity, you understand. He genuinely believes in helping people who need it. Emma felt a flush rise to her cheeks. I noticed he wears no wedding ring. Never found the right woman, Sarah said casually, though her eyes held a knowing gleam. Or perhaps he's been too busy keeping the peace to look properly. Before Emma could respond, Blake himself appeared in the doorway. Sarah, Mrs. Pemberton is asking about that book you promised to lend her. His gaze moved to Emma. If you're not too tired, Miss Rose, I could escort you to the mining office tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock would give us time to speak with Harrison before the day gets busy. That would be perfect. Thank you. He nodded, lingering for a moment longer than necessary before returning to the parlor. Sarah turned back to the dishes, a small smile playing at her lips. 9 o'clock, she murmured. Plenty of time for me to help you press that blue dress in your carpet bag. Emma's eyes widened. How did you? I helped unpack while you were resting. Hope you don't mind. The blue will make a good impression on Harrison, she winked. And on certain deputies who happen to favor that color. Emma felt warmth spread through her chest, not embarrassment, but something lighter, something that, after months of shame and fear, felt remarkably like hope. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the window and the distant sound of a rooster announcing the day. Emma woke feeling more rested than she had in weeks. The bed, though simple, had been comfortable, and the knowledge of having a safe place, if only temporarily, had allowed her to sleep deeply. As promised, Sarah helped press the blue dress, a garment Emma had almost left behind in St. Louis, thinking it too fine for her uncertain future. Now she was grateful for its presence, as she prepared for her meeting with Mr. Harrison. The dress had been made before her pregnancy, but had enough fullness in the skirt to accommodate her changing figure, though the bodice required some adjustment. There, Sarah said, fastening the last button, you look perfectly professional. Emma studied her reflection in the small mirror. The woman who looked back at her seemed different from the one who had stepped off the stagecoach yesterday, still pregnant and unmarried, but somehow more dignified, less desperate. I can never repay your kindness, she said softly. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. No need. Just promise you'll join us for the Founders' Day celebration next week. There's dancing and pie contests and all manner of foolishness. Does the heart good? A knock at the front door interrupted them. Sarah glanced at the small clock on the mantel. Right on time, she noted with approval. Blake was raised with military precision about punctuality. Emma gathered her small leather portfolio containing samples of her bookkeeping and correspondence work. It was slightly worn at the edges, but represented the skills she hoped would secure her future. Blake waited in the foyer, his deputy's badge polished and his hat in his hands. He was freshly shaven, and Emma caught the faint scent of bay rum as he greeted her. Miss Rose, you look. He paused, seeming to search for an appropriate word. Well rested. Thank you, Deputy Anderson. I feel much improved. Sarah handed Emma a shawl. The mornings can be cool, even in summer, and take these biscuits for the walk. With paper-wrapped biscuits in hand and Blake's steadying arm offered, Emma set out into Willow Creek. The town looked different in the morning light, more industrious, less intimidating. Shopkeepers swept their boardwalks, freight wagons delivered goods, and the smell of coffee and wood smoke filled the air. The mining office is at the north end of town, Blake explained as they walked. Harrison lives above it. He's usually an early riser. Tell me about him, Emma requested. What should I expect? Blake considered this. Lester Harrison is in his 50s, widowed about 10 years now. Came west from Boston with mining experience and education. He's fair but exacting. Expects things done properly and on time. He glanced at her. Something tells me you'll appreciate that quality. I do value precision, Emma agreed, especially in financial matters. He's not a man for gossip, which works in your favor, judges people on their merits. Blake hesitated. Your condition will be obvious, Emma finished for him. I would rather be forthright about it. I can assure Mr. Harrison that my child will not interfere with my duties once suitable arrangements are made. Blake nodded, a look of respect crossing his features. Direct approach is best with him. They reached a 2-story brick building with Willow Creek Mining Company painted on a wooden sign above the door. Unlike many of the wooden structures surrounding it, this building suggested permanence and prosperity. Blake knocked firmly. After a moment, footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal a man with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a waistcoat despite the early hour and spectacles perched on his nose. "Deputy Anderson," he greeted, then noticed Emma. "And who might this be?" "Mr. Harrison, may I present Miss Emma Rose, recently arrived from St. Louis. She has experience as a bookkeeper's assistant and with correspondence. I believe she might be the solution to your clerk problem." Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly as he took in Emma's condition, but his expression remained professional. "Is that so? Please come in." The office was methodically organized, with filing cabinets lining one wall, a large desk dominating the center, and a smaller desk positioned near the front window. Maps of mining claims hung on the walls, alongside framed certificates and what appeared to be geological surveys. "Please sit." Harrison indicated a chair before the large desk. He looked to Blake. "Will you be staying, Deputy?" "Only if Miss Rose wishes it." Emma hesitated, then nodded. "I would appreciate Deputy Anderson's presence if you don't mind." Harrison seated himself behind the desk. "Now, Miss Rose, I understand you have experience in bookkeeping. Could you elaborate?" Emma opened her portfolio, revealing neatly kept ledger samples and correspondence. "I worked for Merchants Bank in St. Louis for 3 years, assisting the head bookkeeper. I'm familiar with double-entry bookkeeping, financial correspondence, and filing systems. I also have experience with the new typing machines." Harrison examined her samples with evident interest. "Your penmanship is excellent, and these calculations are precise." He looked up at her. "May I ask why you left your position in St. Louis?" Emma had prepared for this question. "Personal circumstances required a change of location. I sought opportunities in a growing community where my skills might be of value." "I see." Harrison's gaze briefly touched her midsection before returning to her face. "And your condition? How soon do you expect to be confined?" "Approximately 2 months. I would require perhaps 3 weeks afterward before returning to duties." Emma kept her voice steady. "I've arranged boarding at Mrs. Anderson's establishment and will secure appropriate care for my child." Harrison steepled his fingers. "Most businesses would consider your situation prohibitive to employment." "I'm aware," Emma acknowledged. "But I believe my skills and reliability would outweigh any temporary inconvenience." A hint of approval flickered in Harrison's eyes. "Frankly stated." He turned to Blake. "Your thoughts, Deputy?" Blake straightened. "Miss Rose arrived yesterday to discover promised employment had been withdrawn due to her condition. Rather than seek charity, she immediately began pursuing legitimate work. That speaks to her character." Harrison nodded slowly. "The mining office has become increasingly busy. Our previous clerk left considerable confusion in the filing system, and correspondence has fallen behind." He tapped his fingers on the desk. "I would require a month's probationary period to assess your work. Salary would be $30 monthly with Sundays free." Hope surged through Emma. "That would be more than acceptable." "Your condition will raise eyebrows," Harrison warned. "Willow Creek can be traditional in its views." "I've encountered such views before," Emma said quietly. "They do not affect my ability to perform my duties." Harrison seemed to come to a decision. "Very well. You may start tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. We'll evaluate the arrangement after 4 weeks." Emma could scarcely believe her good fortune. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I won't disappoint you." As they exited the mining office a short while later, Emma felt light-headed with relief. "You did well in there," Blake said, a smile warming his features. "Harrison doesn't impress easily." "I can hardly believe it," Emma admitted. "Yesterday I had nothing, and now." Now you have a position, lodging, and people who wish you well. Blake offered his arm again. Shall we share the good news with Sarah? They walked more slowly back toward the boarding house, Emma's step lighter despite her condition. The morning had warmed and the town was fully awake now. Several passers-by nodded to Blake, regarding Emma with curious but less judgmental eyes than the previous day. Being seen with the deputy offers a certain protection, Blake explained when she mentioned this. People are less likely to express disapproval openly. I don't wish to damage your reputation, Emma said carefully. Blake's laugh was unexpected. Miss Rose, I've arrested drunken minors, broken up saloon fights, and once had to retrieve the mayor's prize pig from the roof of the church. My reputation can withstand escorting a lady through town. His easy manner loosened something tight in Emma's chest. In that case, perhaps you would consider calling me Emma. Miss Rose sounds so formal from someone who has seen me at my most vulnerable. Emma, he repeated, as if testing the name. Then you must call me Blake, at least when we're not in public settings. They had reached the boarding house, but instead of entering immediately, Emma paused on the porch. Blake, she said softly, I want to thank you properly. What you did yesterday at the station, stepping forward when everyone else turned away, it was more than kindness. It was. She searched for the right word. Heroic. A flush crept up his neck. It wasn't heroism, Emma, just basic decency. Decency seems rare enough these days to qualify as heroic, she smiled up at him. Nevertheless, I am grateful. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight parting of his lips as if words formed and then retreated. Finally, he simply nodded. You're welcome, truly. The door opened before either could say more, revealing Sarah's expectant face. Well, don't keep me in suspense, Emma broke into a genuine smile. I start tomorrow morning. Sarah's answering whoop of delight drew the attention of Mrs. Pemberton, who was passing through the foyer. Soon the news had spread throughout the boarding house, and congratulations flowed from all quarters. Even Mr. Jenkins, who had initially regarded Emma with reserved politeness, offered a gruff, well done, young lady. Blake stayed for a cup of coffee, watching the scene with evident satisfaction. When he finally took his leave, citing deputy duties, he paused at the door to speak quietly to Emma. Harrison's a fair employer, you'll do well there. I hope so. I know so. His confidence warmed her. Perhaps I could escort you to the office tomorrow. Just the first day to ensure you're properly settled. Emma recognized the offer for what it was, not just courtesy, but a public statement of support. I would appreciate that very much. As he departed, Sarah appeared at Emma's side. My brother seems quite taken with you, she observed. He's been extraordinarily kind. Blake is kind to many people, Sarah agreed, but he doesn't look at most of them the way he looks at you. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. Sarah, you know my situation. I'm hardly in a position to encourage any man's interest. Perhaps not, Sarah conceded. But the heart rarely consults circumstances before choosing its path. She squeezed Emma's hand. Just something to consider. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Emma's position at the mining office proved challenging but satisfying. Mr. Harrison's disorganized files required complete reorganization, backlogged correspondence needed addressing, and the accounts demanded careful reconciliation. Emma threw herself into the work, grateful for meaningful employment that engaged her mind and provided for her future. True to Blake's prediction, Harrison proved to be a fair employer. He recognized Emma's skills quickly and increasingly relied on her judgment in office matters. If he had any concerns about her condition, he kept them to himself, merely adjusting her desk and chair to ensure her comfort as her pregnancy advanced. Blake continued to escort her to the office each morning, a routine that began as courtesy but evolved into something both looked forward to. Their conversations ranged from town gossip to deeper discussions of books they had read and places they hoped to visit. Emma found herself opening up about her childhood in Illinois, her parents' early passing, and her dreams of education that had given way to practical necessities. Blake, in turn, shared stories of his service during the war, his journey west with Sarah after their parents' deaths, and his hopes for Willow Creek's future. He spoke of his work as deputy with pride, but admitted to occasional doubts about whether he was making a real difference. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just keeping a lid on a pot that's always threatening to boil over," he confessed one morning as they walked past the saloon, already occupied despite the early hour. "You create space for people like Sarah to build something good," Emma replied. "That matters." His smile in response had lingered in her thoughts for days afterward. At the boarding house, Emma found herself embraced by an unexpected community. Sarah became not just a landlady but a friend, offering practical advice about preparing for the baby and emotional support when Emma's fears threatened to overwhelm her. Mrs. Pemberton, initially reserved, began knitting tiny garments for the coming child. Even Mr. Jenkins contributed by crafting a small wooden cradle, presenting it to Emma with gruff embarrassment. "Been a while since these old hands made anything useful," he muttered as she thanked him tearfully. The wider town's response to Emma remained mixed. Some, particularly the church ladies and more conservative business owners, maintained a cool distance. Others, perhaps influenced by her association with the deputy and her professional position at the mining office, offered cautious acceptance. When Founders' Day arrived in early August, Emma was entering her 8th month. Her condition was unmistakable now, her movements slower, but Harrison had expressed no concern about her continued work, merely suggesting she might take more frequent breaks. "The celebration's the highlight of summer," Sarah explained as she helped Emma dress for the event. "The whole town gathers in the square. There's music, dancing, food competitions, games for the children. Are you certain my presence won't cause discomfort?" Emma asked, smoothing her dress over her rounded belly. Sarah snorted inelegantly. "Let them be uncomfortable. Besides, Blake would be terribly disappointed if you didn't attend." The mention of Blake brought a flush to Emma's cheeks. Over the past weeks, she had become increasingly aware of her feelings for the deputy, feelings that went far beyond gratitude for his initial kindness. His steady presence, his thoughtful conversations, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, all had combined to create an attachment she had not sought, but could no longer deny. Yet she had maintained careful boundaries. Her child must be her priority, and Blake deserved better than a woman carrying another man's baby and the scandal that accompanied her. Friendship was all she could allow herself to hope for. The town square had been transformed for Founders' Day. Lanterns hung from trees, tables laden with food lined one side, and a platform for musicians occupied another. Children ran laughing between displays of local crafts, while adults gathered in conversational clusters. Blake found them almost immediately upon their arrival, looking different in his best shirt and without his deputy's badge. "Sarah, Emma, you both look lovely." Sarah rolled her eyes affectionately. "Save your charm for Emma. I see Mrs. Wilson beckoning me toward the pie-judging table." Left alone with Blake, Emma felt suddenly shy. "The celebration looks wonderful. Wait until the dancing starts." He offered his arm. "Would you care to walk, or would you prefer to sit? There are benches by the lemonade stand. Walking would be nice." "The doctor says it's good for me at this stage." They strolled slowly through the celebration, pausing to admire children's artwork, sample offerings from food tables, and greet acquaintances. Emma noticed the varied reactions to her presence, some welcoming, others pointedly turning away, but Blake's steady presence beside her made the latter easier to bear. "Miss Rose, Deputy Anderson?" They turned to find Mr. Harrison approaching, accompanied by a distinguished-looking couple. "Mr. Harrison," Emma greeted him. "Are you enjoying the festivities?" "Indeed." "May I introduce my brother and sister-in-law visiting from Denver, George, Martha. This is Miss Emma Rose, the miraculous clerk I wrote to you about, and Deputy Blake Anderson." George Harrison extended his hand first to Blake, then, after only the briefest hesitation, to Emma. "A pleasure to meet you both." My brother speaks highly of your organizational skills, Miss Rose. He exaggerates, Emma demurred, but the work is enjoyable. Not exaggeration at all, Lester Harrison countered. The office runs more smoothly now than it has in years. As the conversation continued, Emma felt a strange tightening across her abdomen. She maintained her smile, but Blake, ever observant, noticed her discomfort. Perhaps we should find that bench after all, he suggested quietly. Emma nodded, making polite farewells to the Harrisons. Blake guided her to a seat beneath a cottonwood tree, its branches providing welcome shade. "Are you unwell?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Just some discomfort." The doctor mentioned these practice contractions might occur. Blake's eyes widened slightly. "Should I fetch Sarah, or the doctor?" Emma smiled at his alarm. "Neither is necessary, it will pass." She placed her hand over his where it rested on the bench between them. "But thank you for your concern." The touch lingered longer than propriety might allow. When Emma finally withdrew her hand, Blake's expression had grown serious. "Emma, I've been wanting to speak with you about something." Her heart quickened. "Yes." Before he could continue, the band struck up a lively tune and couples began gathering for dancing. A group of children ran past, momentarily distracting them both. When Blake turned back to her, his expression had changed, becoming more guarded. "Perhaps this isn't the right time," he said. Emma felt disappointment mingled with relief. Whatever Blake had been about to say, she wasn't certain she was ready to hear it. The rest of the afternoon passed pleasantly. Emma remained seated, accepting visits from Sarah, Mrs. Pemberton, and even Mr. Peterson from the Harvey house, who offered a somewhat stiff apology for his earlier treatment of her. Blake stayed nearby, occasionally bringing refreshments or introducing her to townspeople she hadn't yet met. As evening approached and lanterns were lit against the gathering dusk, the band shifted to slower, more romantic melodies. Couples swayed together in the center of the square, their faces softened by lamplight and sentiment. "Would you care to dance?" Blake asked suddenly. Emma looked up in surprise. "I hardly think I'd make a graceful partner at present." "I don't require grace," he replied with a smile, "just your company." Perhaps it was the music or the magic of the celebration or simply weeks of growing affection, but Emma found herself nodding. "One dance, then." Blake led her to the edge of the dancing area where they would be less observed. Carefully, respectfully, he placed one hand at her waist and took her other hand in his. The distance between them remained proper, yet Emma felt the warmth of his touch like a current running through her body. They moved slowly, barely more than a gentle sway, but it was enough. In that moment, with fireflies beginning to light the deepening twilight and music surrounding them, Emma allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where her child would have a father who looked at her the way Blake was looking at her now. "Emma," he said softly, his voice barely audible above the music, "I need to tell you something." "Blake, please don't." She wasn't ready for words that might shatter this fragile moment. "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung between them, honest and unadorned. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. "You can't," she whispered. "My situation, I know your situation." His grip tightened slightly on her hand. "I know you carry another man's child. I know there will be talk and judgment. I know all of it, Emma, and it doesn't change how I feel." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You deserve better. Better than a woman of courage, intelligence, and grace. I don't think such a woman exists." He released her waist to gently brush away her tear. "I'm not asking for promises, Emma. I just needed you to know." Before she could respond, a sharp pain seized her abdomen, far more intense than the earlier discomfort. Emma gasped, clutching Blake's arm. "Emma, what is it?" "I don't." Another pain cut off her words. "Something's wrong." Alarm flooded Blake's features. He immediately guided her away from the dancers, supporting her weight as another pain washed over her. "Sarah," he called, spotting his sister nearby. "Fetch the doctor." Now, Sarah took one look at Emma's face and ran without question. Blake helped Emma to a nearby bench, his arm steady around her shoulders. "It's too early," Emma whispered, fear rising in her throat. "The baby isn't due for weeks yet." Dr. Simmons will know what to do, Blake assured her, though worry creased his brow. Just breathe, I'm right here. Time seemed to slow as they waited, each contraction bringing fresh fear. When Dr. Simmons finally arrived, his assessment was swift and decisive. We need to get her somewhere private. The baby's coming and there's nothing to be done about it. My boarding house is closest, Sarah offered, having returned with the doctor. What followed was a blur of movement and pain. Blake carried Emma the short distance to the boarding house, his strength never faltering despite her weight. Sarah cleared the parlor of curious boarders while the doctor sent for his medical bag. Emma was aware of being settled on Sarah's bed, of Blake's reluctant departure from the room at the doctor's insistence, of Sarah's cool hand on her forehead as pain tore through her body again and again. The baby's coming fast, Dr. Simmons noted, his voice professionally calm. Sometimes the early ones are determined to make a quick entrance, hours compressed into an eternity of pain and effort. Emma heard herself cry out, felt Sarah's encouragement, and sensed Blake's presence just beyond the door. When final, searing pain gave way to the thin cry of a newborn, tears of relief streamed down Emma's face. A girl, Dr. Simmons announced, placing the tiny, red-faced infant on Emma's chest. Small, but she seemed strong. Emma gazed down at her daughter, overcome with love so intense it felt like physical pain. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "You're early, but you're perfect." Sarah squeezed her hand. "She's beautiful, Emma." As the doctor completed his work and Sarah helped clean and swaddle the newborn, Emma felt exhaustion wash over her. Yet beneath the fatigue lay a fierce determination. This child, her daughter, would have a better life than the one that had seemed inevitable in St. Louis. Somehow Emma would ensure it. When Blake was finally permitted to enter, his face reflected both concern and wonder as he approached the bed where Emma lay with her daughter. "How are you?" he asked softly. "Tired," Emma admitted, "but well." His gaze moved to the infant. "And the little one?" "Perfect, early but strong." Emma hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to hold her?" Blake's expression transformed with a mixture of awe and terror. "I don't know how, like this," Emma demonstrated, then carefully transferred her daughter to his arms. The sight of Blake, strong, capable Blake, holding her tiny daughter with such careful tenderness broke something open in Emma's heart. This was what she wanted, she realized with sudden clarity. Not just security or acceptance, but this man, with his integrity and his kindness, to help her raise her child. "She's so small," Blake marveled, one finger gently stroking the baby's cheek. "But mighty," Emma smiled. "Like her mother, I hope." Blake looked up, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "Exactly like her mother." Sarah quietly left the room, closing the door behind her to give them privacy. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the baby's soft breathing and the distant celebration still ongoing in the town square. "What you said earlier," Emma finally began, "about your feelings." Blake carefully returned the baby to her arms. "I meant every word." "But this isn't the time to—" "It's exactly the time," Emma interrupted gently. "Because I've just brought a new life into this world, and I need to be completely honest with you and with myself." She took a deep breath. "I think I'm falling in love with you too, Blake Anderson, and it terrifies me." His expression softened. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I never expected to feel this way again. Because I have a newborn daughter who must be my priority. Because I've already made one catastrophic mistake in trusting a man." She looked down at her daughter. "Because you deserve a woman without my complications." Blake moved to sit carefully on the edge of the bed. "Emma, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "I became a deputy because I believe in protecting people, in standing for what's right even when it's difficult." He reached out to gently touch the baby's tiny hand. "This little girl isn't a complication, she's a blessing, and you're the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known." Tears threatened again. "You can't know what you're taking on." "I know exactly what I'm offering," Blake corrected. "Not immediate marriage, we both need time, but my support, my respect, and my heart for as long as you'll have them." Emma looked down at her daughter, then back at Blake. "She'll need a name," he smiled, understanding her implicit acceptance. "Do you have one in mind?" "Hope," Emma said softly. "Her name is Hope." Blake reached out to take Emma's free hand, his thumb gently caressing her knuckles. "It's perfect." The days following Hope's birth passed in a haze of exhaustion and joy. Emma and her daughter remained at the boarding house, where Sarah proved an invaluable help with the newborn. Dr. Simmons visited daily, pronouncing both mother and child to be recovering well despite the early delivery. Word of the birth spread quickly through Willow Creek. Emma was touched by the steady stream of visitors bearing gifts for the baby tiny gowns from Mrs. Pemberton, a rattle carved by Mr. Jenkins, and even a silver cup from Mr. Harrison, who assured her that her position would be waiting whenever she felt ready to return. Blake visited every day, sometimes bringing small gifts, other times simply sitting beside Emma as she nursed Hope or rocked her to sleep. He showed remarkable aptitude with the infant, his large hands gentle as he learned to hold and comfort her. "You're a natural," Emma observed one evening as Blake successfully soothed Hope's fussing. "Had some practice with my cousin's children," he admitted, "but this feels different." His eyes met Emma's. "She feels like family." The word hung between them, full of promise and possibility. As the weeks passed, Emma gradually regained her strength. Hope thrived, growing from a tiny, red-faced newborn into an alert infant with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Blake continued his careful courtship, respecting Emma's need for recovery and adjustment to motherhood. They took short walks when Emma felt strong enough, Hope bundled in a shawl between them. Sometimes they simply sat on the boarding house porch in the evening, talking quietly as the baby slept. "Mr. Harrison asked when you might return," Blake mentioned during one such evening. "No pressure," he said, "just wondering." Emma adjusted Hope in her arms. "I've been thinking about that. I'm not sure the mining office is right for me anymore." Blake raised an eyebrow. "Oh. The hours are long and I'd be away from Hope all day." Emma hesitated. "Sarah mentioned that she's been wanting help with the boarding house accounts. It would allow me to work from home with Hope nearby." "That sounds sensible," Blake agreed. "Harrison will be disappointed, but he'll understand." Emma smiled. "There's something else I've been considering." She took a deep breath. "The empty storefront next to the general store. Mrs. Wilson mentioned it's for rent." "What are you thinking? A bookkeeping service?" Emma explained, excitement creeping into her voice. "Many businesses in town need help with their accounts but can't afford a full-time bookkeeper. I could offer my services a few days a week for each client. It would give me flexibility for Hope while using my skills." Blake's face lit with admiration. "That's brilliant, Emma. You'd be filling a real need in town." "It would require investment," she cautioned. "Rent, supplies, furniture, I have savings," Blake offered immediately. "I'd be honored to invest in your business." Emma shook her head. "That's generous, but I couldn't accept. However," she hesitated. "I might consider a partner, someone who could share both the investment and the returns." Understanding dawned in Blake's eyes. "A business partnership. For now," Emma confirmed, "until we're both certain about other kinds of partnership." Blake reached over to take her hand, his thumb gently stroking her palm. "I'm already certain, Emma, but I can wait until you're ready." Hope stirred in Emma's arms, her tiny face scrunching before settling back to sleep. Blake watched them both, his expression tender. "She has your determination," he observed. "Already fighting sleep," Emma laughed softly. "And your stubbornness. Once she decides something, there's no changing her mind." Their eyes met over the baby's head, the shared joke creating an intimacy that needed no words. In that moment, Emma knew with certainty that this man, this kind, steadfast man who had taken her hand when no one else would, was meant to be part of her future. 3 months after Hope's birth, Emma's bookkeeping service opened its doors. "Rose Accounting and Correspondence," read the simple sign above the storefront. Inside, a tidy office with 2 desks, one for Emma, one for clients and a small area in the back where Hope could sleep or play under her mother's watchful eye. The business grew steadily. The general store became her first client, followed by the saloon, whose owner was surprisingly meticulous about his finances, the hotel, and eventually even the bank. Emma hired Sarah part-time to help with filing and to watch Hope when client meetings required Emma's full attention. Blake's support never wavered. He stopped by the office almost daily, sometimes bringing lunch, other times simply checking that all was well. In the evenings, he often joined Emma and Hope for supper at the boarding house, the three of them gradually forming a family unit that everyone in town recognized, even if it lacked formal definition. The whispers about Emma's situation had largely subsided. Her professionalism, Blake's obvious devotion, and Hope's cherubic presence had combined to soften even the most judgmental hearts. When Emma and Hope attended church, they no longer received cold shoulders but were welcomed into the congregation, with several older women vying for the chance to hold the baby during services. As winter approached, bringing the first snow to Willow Creek, Blake invited Emma for a sleigh ride. Sarah eagerly volunteered to watch Hope, her knowing smile suggesting she understood the significance of the outing. The sleigh was borrowed from Mr. Harrison, a handsome conveyance with polished runners and warm blankets. Blake drove them through town and then out into the open countryside, where snow blanketed the hills in pristine white. "It's beautiful," Emma breathed, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Beautiful," Blake agreed, though his eyes were on her rather than the scenery. They stopped on a hillside overlooking Willow Creek, the town's lights beginning to twinkle in the early dusk. Blake secured the horse, then rejoined Emma in the sleigh, tucking the blankets more securely around them both. "I wanted to show you something," he said, pointing toward the northern edge of town. "See that plot of land just past the church?" Emma squinted through the gathering darkness. "With the large oak tree, that's the one. I purchased it last week." She turned to him in surprise. "You bought land," Blake nodded, suddenly looking nervous. "For a house, if you and Hope would consider living there with me?" Emma's heart began to race. "Blake." He took her gloved hand in his. "I love you," Emma rose. "I've loved you since that first day at the station when you stood so brave and alone. I love your strength, your intelligence, your determination." His voice softened. "And I love Hope as if she were my own daughter." Tears pricked Emma's eyes, freezing almost instantly in the cold. "I know it's only been a few months," Blake continued, "and I promise to give you time, but I'm certain of what I want, Emma, a life with you and Hope, a family." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Emma whispered. Blake's smile was tender as he reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I am, with all my heart." He opened the box to reveal a ring not ostentatious but lovely in its simplicity, a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires on a gold band. "It was my mother's," Blake explained. "Sarah insisted I should have it for this purpose." Emma looked from the ring to Blake's face, seeing all the love and hope she felt reflected in his eyes. The past year had brought her from despair to this moment, this perfect, unexpected moment with a man who had proven his worth in every way that mattered. "Yes," she said, her voice clear despite her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Blake Anderson." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a gentle kiss there first, but carrying the promise of a lifetime of such moments to come. The wedding took place in early spring, when wildflowers dotted the hills around Willow Creek and Hope was just beginning to sit up on her own. The ceremony was held in the church, with Sarah as Emma's attendant and Sheriff Mitchell standing up for Blake. Emma wore a gown of pale blue silk, Sarah's insistence, overriding Emma's protests that a widow's practical dress would suffice. "You're not a widow," Sarah had pointed out. "You're a bride, and you'll dress like one." Hope, resplendent in a white dress with blue ribbons, was held by Mrs. Pemberton during the ceremony, though she reached for Blake the moment he turned from the altar as a married man. The entire town attended the celebration afterward. Even those who had initially shunned Emma now offered congratulations and good wishes. Mr. Harrison made a toast to the couple, praising both Emma's business acumen and Blake's judgment in recognizing the most valuable asset ever to arrive at Willow Creek Station. As evening fell and lanterns were lit in the town square, Blake led his new wife in their first dance as husband and wife. Hope, passed among adoring townsfolk throughout the celebration, was finally asleep in Sarah's arms nearby. "Happy, Mrs. Anderson," Blake murmured as they swayed to the music. "Completely," Emma replied, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." His arms tightened slightly around her waist. "When I saw you standing alone at that station last summer, I never imagined we'd be here." Emma smiled up at him. "You changed my life that day. You changed mine," Blake countered. "You and Hope you gave me purpose beyond just keeping the peace." As the music continued around them, Emma rested her head against her husband's shoulder, marveling at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a desperate, pregnant woman whom nobody wanted, to a wife, mother, and respected businesswoman with a future full of promise. "What are you thinking?" Blake asked softly. Emma lifted her head to meet his gaze. "That sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to exactly where we're meant to be." His smile was tender as he leaned down to kiss her, a promise of all the tomorrows they would share, surrounded by the community that had become their home and the love that had given them both a second chance. 3 years later, Emma stood on the porch of their home, watching Blake swing a laughing Hope in circles while their 1-year-old son William toddled after them, demanding, "Me too, me too." The house Blake had built on that plot of land with the oak tree had become everything Emma had dreamed of, a haven of warmth and love, filled with children's laughter and the deep contentment of a life well lived. Her bookkeeping business continued to thrive, now employing 2 assistants while allowing Emma to work primarily from home. Blake had been promoted to sheriff following Mitchell's retirement, a position that suited his natural authority and commitment to justice. Sarah had married the town's new schoolteacher the previous summer, but still visited almost daily, bringing freshly baked treats and news from the boarding house. As the sun began to set behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Blake gathered both children in his arms and made his way back to the porch. "I think these 2 are ready for supper," he announced, setting Hope down but keeping William, who had nestled sleepily against his shoulder. Hope, now nearly 4 and the image of her mother with Blake's blue eyes, tugged at Emma's skirt. "Can we have story time after supper, Mama?" "The one about the station." Emma exchanged a smile with Blake. Hope's favorite bedtime story had always been the tale of how her parents met, carefully edited for young ears, but maintaining the essential truth of a brave woman and the kind man who took her hand when no one else would. "Of course, sweetheart," Emma promised, stroking her daughter's dark curls. "We can tell that story as many times as you like." Later, with both children tucked into bed and the house quiet under the silver light of the moon, Emma joined Blake on the porch swing. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close against the evening chill. "Hope asked for the station story again," Emma said, nestling against his side. Blake chuckled. "Of course she did, our little romantic. She loves the idea that you rescued me." "We both know who really did the rescuing," Blake said softly, pressing a kiss to Emma's temple. "You saved yourself, Emma. I just had the good sense to recognize what a treasure had arrived in Willow Creek." Emma turned to face her husband, the lines of his beloved face softened by moonlight. After 4 years together, her love for him had only deepened, weathering the challenges of building a life together with the solid foundation of mutual respect and unwavering support. "We rescued each other," she corrected gently, "and created something beautiful in the process." As Blake drew her into a tender kiss, Emma thought of that long-ago summer day when she had stood alone and afraid on the station platform. How far she had come since then, how far they had all come, building a family and a future from what had seemed like nothing but desperation and shattered dreams. Sometimes the greatest journeys began with a single act of kindness. Sometimes the happiest endings grew from the most difficult beginnings. And sometimes, Emma reflected as she held her husband close under the vast Colorado sky. Love found you in the most unexpected places, even at a dusty train station where nobody wanted the pregnant bride, except for one courageous cowboy who took her hand before the crowd.